Good afternoon, everyone. Let's get started. Welcome to this month's Research Matters. I'm Erica Salzik, the Department Administrator for UT Southwestern's Human Research Protection Program, and I will be one of the moderators for today's session. So, as usual, I will go over some housekeeping items quickly. If you have any questions for our presenters, please type them in the Q&A. One of the moderators will respond to you during the session, or we will address it at the end of the presentation. This session is recorded and will be available immediately after the conclusion of the live session by clicking on the Microsoft Teams Live link in the Outlook appointment. We will send the slides and handouts out via the listserv, and you will also be able to access the slides and recordings on HRPP's Research Matters website, which can be found under the Training and Resources page. We do provide a certificate of attendance for those who have logged in using a valid email address. So if you do not receive one but should have, please send an email to hrpp@utsouthwestern.edu to request a certificate. And lastly, we want to hear from you. We are interested to know what topics you would like us to cover during these sessions. How did our speakers do, and how is our office doing? So if you can, please take a few minutes today to complete the survey and provide your feedback. You may access the survey using your phone via the QR code here, or you can select the link and complete the survey on your computer. We will also drop the link in for the survey in the Q&A in just a minute. So here's the agenda for today. I will provide a quick follow-up on last month's Research Matters session. Then I will turn it over to the Regulatory Support Office. This month, we will kick off a 6-part mini-series on the FDA IND IDE regulatory process. Today, we will begin on how to prepare for the initial IND IDE application. And this will be presented by Rasija Nambiar, Raj Bardarjan, and Eriko Iwatate. For a featured topic, Tara Garcia will be talking about electronic consent and record keeping, and we will conclude with an open Q&A session. So as we mentioned, we wanted to follow up on the Research Matters session held last month. As you may recall, the featured topic was an overview of SIRB and reliance processes. There were many questions during the session, and after the session, we invited you to submit additional questions to the SIRB inbox. However, we did not receive any questions, but we wanted to let you know that we recognize this topic is important, and we plan to have another Research Matters session in the future on SIRB and reliance matters. And so that will conclude the follow-up, and I'll turn it over to RSO.
Thanks, Erica. Hi, everyone. I'm Eriko. I'm with Raj Bardarajan and Rasija Nambiar. So we are from HRPP Regulatory Support Office. So we are thrilled to start new Sponsor Investigator Support Program FDA mini-series. So before that, I want to quickly remind you Regulatory Support Office free services that we offer to investigator and study team. Once again, first, we have CT.gov support program. We assist responsible parties, so PI with clinicaltrials.gov reporting. Second, we also assist sponsors, so who initiate the clinical investigation and who holds the IND and IDE with FDA reporting requirements, so which includes IND, IDE, preparation, submission, and maintenance activities. Finally, we provide resources, regulatory education, and best practice training to the research community. Regulatory Support Office is really here to provide comprehensive regulatory regulatory expertise, regulatory support, and regulatory education to investigator and their team. With that, here is an outline of 6 parts FDA mini-series. So the goal of this mini-series is to provide step-by-step guidance on IND IDE regulatory process. So today, Resija and Raj will provide practical advice and tips and demonstrate best practice on how to successfully prepare IND and IDE. So I'm going to turn over to Resija to kick off the part 1 of FDA 6 parts mini-series. Resija?
Thank you, Eriko. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start with a quick overview of IND so that we are all on the same page before Raj talks about the in-depth IND preparation. So, what is an IND? IND is a request for authorization from the FDA to administer investigational articles, that is drugs and biologics, to humans. There are 2 main types of IND, commercial IND and research IND. Ultimate goal of commercial IND is to obtain marketing approval of investigational drugs or biologics, and often initiated by the drug companies. Primary goal of research IND is to research and to publish the results of drug trial. Majority of INDs, which are submitted by the academic institutions like UT Southwestern, are research INDs. The contents of IND application are as seen here, which will be discussed in detail by Raj. Finally, who must submit an IND? It is the sponsor or sponsor investigator who submits it. Now, let's review some of the definitions. A sponsor is the one who initiates a clinical investigation. The investigator is the one who conducts a clinical investigation, and the sponsor investigator is the one who both initiates and conducts the clinical investigation. I want to remind you that sponsor and investigator each have responsibilities during clinical investigation of investigational products. In this slide, I have summarized the responsibilities for both. In the interest of time, I won't go over all, but I want to highlight one of the sponsor responsibilities, that is, maintaining an effective IND or IDE by reviewing and evaluating evidence related to safety and effectiveness of the drug, submit safety reports, annual reports, protocol amendments to the FDA. So if you're not the sponsor, if you're not initiating the clinical investigation, you do not have to worry about preparing the IND. To learn more about IND and sponsor responsibilities, please visit our website. We have the links to the videos on these topics. That is the drug overview and IND preparation, which was done in July last year during Research Matters. And the other one that I did on sponsor and sponsor investigator responsibilities in January last year. Now, this is the IND life cycle, and throughout these mini series, we will talk about each of these steps in detail. But today, we will focus only on step 1 and portion of step 2. So step 1, visit our website and book a free consultation. Here is the link available on our website. And when we meet, the first thing we will do is to determine appropriate regulatory pathway for the study team. There are different regulatory pathways and requirements for different types of INDs as shown here. As mentioned earlier, the majority of INDs submitted by the UT Southwestern investigators are non-commercial IND, namely research IND, which we will focus in today's talk. In addition to the regulatory pathways for your clinical investigation, we also provide guidance on other parallel requirements such as IRB submission and clinicaltrials.gov reporting requirements and timing for these submissions. During this time, we help you clarify the parallel requirements and provide assistance however we can. These are some of the questions we often get. The next step is to assess whether pre-IND consultation meeting with FDA is needed for your study. For example, there may be a situation where it is unclear an IND is required or not, and we can actually request a formal meeting with FDA. And these are different divisions that we can contact and seek advice, which we can also help you with. Then once we know that the IND needs to be submitted, we will review the IND contents and format with the study team. Now I'm going to pass it over to Raj to talk about IND contents in detail and IND application preparation best practice. Take it away, Raj.
Thank you, Rasija. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be presenting the IND and IDE application preparation. First IND and then IDE. My IND focus will be on research IND or investigator-initiated IND. Research IND application has administrative, clinical, and non-clinical components. Investigator teams can get a lot of assistance for the IND preparation from the Regulatory Support Office, where we provide guidance for putting together the documents and content for the IND components, and review and feedback on the draft documents to get them all up to submission readiness. Our support will also direct you to the UT Southwest online resources for certain document templates and links to the FDA sites for downloading the federal forms and additional guidance information if needed. Next slide, please. Here is the checklist showing the breakdown of the different IND components seen in the previous slides. Our review process will go through the content of each checklist item to make sure that they meet the regulatory requirements. Here, we should stress that our review process will not be critiquing the scientific or clinical details or their accuracy, but rather confirming the regulatory quality required for the IND approval to enable study initiation. Regulatory quality in document content will be assessed based on adequacy, acceptability, and standard as required. Thus, our approach incorporates the FDA guidance as well as what we have learned over a long period, the requirements for successfully getting many INDs approved and by frequently communicating with the FDA. What the investigator team will see in the RSO service is our objective and best practice to make the entire IND process simple, straightforward, and manageable. This is in addition to how we extend the support specific to your study situation. Please remember, we make this type of service available for all the IND stages throughout the life cycle of the study. RSO service process also ensures that the content in every document meet the intended scope. Let's see this in a few checklist items. For instance, the cover letter. It has a purpose as a preface to the IND application. In addition to carrying the routine information such as the investigator title, the document list, etc., there's a lot more one can use the cover letter for. For instance, you can convey the reviewer in 2 to 3 sentences how the initial research study is unique and how the previous FDA-approved drug is going to be used in the new context of investigation. Similarly, the FDA forms 1572, 1571, 3674 are submitted each with a purpose. For example, 1571, it's a kind of agreement to bring together the sponsor, the institution, and the FDA. 1572 is another agreement between the sponsor and the investigator, or sponsor investigator and sub-investigators. Again, we would like to emphasize that our review, feedback, and guidance for each IND document will focus on the critical elements tied to the purpose and scope of the document. Letter of authorization. It is a critical piece in the application package. It is provided by the manufacturer or IND holder of the approved drug to be used. LOA, it's called, is needed for the FDA to cross-reference the manufacturer's IND in certain areas of the drug and the study for the proposed research IND. Sometimes the scope of LOA can extend to cover the manufacturer's intent to provide the actual drug sample for the IND. This happens when using highly controlled restricted drugs or some special category of drugs not widely distributed in the market. All these items, from cover letter through the letter of agreement, represent the peripheral or supporting documents for the IND application. In the next set of slides, let's see the documents that are integral to the IND. The initial application document is a very important piece that keeps the different parts of the IND. It has multiple sections, which you can see from the template on the right side panel of the slide. Information for some sections is put together by the investigator team from research documents, manuscripts, and grant applications. For other sections, reference is made to documents obtained from the external sources, such as the previous IND, package insert, or investigator brochure. Let me show some details in the next few slides to give a better idea. The application document comprises very logically laid out sections covering various topics you can see in the right side panel with the different colors. The first segment, namely the study information, brings together the different elements that describe what your study is all about. It includes an introduction to the drug in the first section, and then a descriptive overview of how the proposed study is planned. In the second, both sections have a moderate level of details in the content. The second set of colored sections below focus on certain previously known information on the drug and the study, which need to come from external sources. Let's see some details of the introduction section of the template. Here, the italicized text includes the guidance and instructions for every section and subsection, which are removed when you finish writing. Sometimes the guidance also comes with examples and suggestions to structure your description. Be sure to include tables, figures, and images as needed. The introduction section is meant for including the drug information with a brief rationale on how this previously approved or used drug is being fitted in the proposed context, be it for a different indication or population, or even a new way of delivering it to the subjects, whatever is being proposed. If there are questions, RSO can assist you as well. General investigational plan. This forms the section 2 of the template. It presents the study vision of the initial IND in some detail for the first year term or phase 1 or phase 2. Most information here is the study overview or synopsis. It can come from the investigator's work, say from publications, manuscripts, and grant applications. Remember, one doesn't have to be exhaustive with the study details in this section. There is going to be a study protocol included in the application, providing a lot of details in depth. At the end of the sections 1 and 2, be sure to compile references cited in those sections. You can have all the references consolidated at the end of section 2 or independently under each section. Now there is the good news. If you are not the manufacturer of the drug or biologic, there is not a whole lot to worry about the following sections, which are investigator brochure, CMC, pharmacology, toxicology, and previous human experience. You can refer to the package insert or the letter of agreement that will provide the reference to these topics from the previous IND. I'll go over the information in the next few slides. Investigator brochure is not required for single site research INDs. IBs, they are called. They're needed if multiple sites or multiple approved drugs are involved. For multiple sites, each site gets an IB. For multiple drugs, there are separate IBs for each drug. The investigator team has the option to request an IB when seeking the letter of agreement from the manufacturer. So what is an IB? It is a comprehensive manual which serves as a clinical team's reference at the site. It includes non-clinical, manufacturing, and clinical information of the drug, along with the side effects and adverse events in a nutshell. If you need to prepare an IB, the research IND template has the guidance. In addition, RSO can assist. Clinical research is a section that provides a good summary of the clinical protocol, highlighting the key areas of the proposed clinical studies in 1 to 2 pages. In a way, there is a lot of information overlap between the content here and section 2. However, each document conveys the message at different levels. Quality section. This is very important because it talks about the drug manufacturing, processing, and quality compliance aspects. The FDA does not expect all this information in an investigator IND. However, it is important to cite the package insert or the manufacturer's IND as the reference source for the quality section. The IB will also serve the purpose. Non-clinical section refers to certain aspects of animal studies, such as pharmacology and toxicology, which were completed previously for the drug when testing it in non-human systems prior to human clinical trials. For the proposed investigator-initiated IND, details of those non-clinical studies can be referenced to the package insert or the manufacturer's IB. Clinical section, again, pertains to the previous IND. When the drug was going through the human clinical studies, the purpose of this section is to highlight for the benefit of the proposed IND on how the human subjects may respond to the drug, particularly in terms of safety and or effectiveness. Journal publications, package insert, or manufacturer's IB will all serve as a good reference source here as well. Additional information. Sometimes PIs are obligated to provide additional information in certain areas, especially when the drug or the treatment itself may have some potential risks. For example, when human subjects are treated with some drugs with certain known potential hallucinogenic side effects, the PI needs to provide an explanation on what measures are in place to deal with those side effects. Similarly, when treating pediatric subjects, there could be certain foreseeable risks. In such instances, the PI statement is critical in describing the combative measures in place to address those potential risks. This is what the FDA would like to see. The last item in this section is the appendix, which will list all the accompanying items that are included in the IND package. Clinical protocol constitutes the heart and soul of the IND, since it provides the comprehensive information of all the study details. So it is of utmost importance to do a good job here. For that to happen, getting a good clinical protocol template that matches your need is critical. There are two very good templates available, one developed by the Simmons Cancer Center and the other developed by the NIH FDA, especially for phase 2 and phase 3 studies. Both are certainly comprehensive and based on ICH and GCP guidelines. Informed consent is an adjunct piece of the protocol. The FDA would like to see at least an ICF template, if not a fully customized document for the proposed study. The agency always accepts the institutional IRB approved template or a draft consent. Next slide, please. Package insert. It is a quick reference brochure and literature source written by the drug manufacturer intended for the pharmacists, clinicians, as well as consumers and users of the product. It summarizes at a high level the key information about the drug, outcomes from testing animals and human subjects, critical elements in manufacturing, and so forth. As you may recall, package insert is an excellent information source to refer to for writing several areas that I mentioned in the previous slides. Last but not the least, the investigator's CV is yet another important document for the application package, which brings us to the conclusion of the IND preparation topic. Now, I'll turn it over to Rasija for the introduction to the devices before I join again to talk about the IDE preparation. Here is Rasija.
Thank you, Raj. Now moving on to device. This is a quick overview of device and IDE for your reference. Similar to IND for drug studies, all in clinical evaluations of investigational device, unless exempt, must request to FDA for authorization or IDE to use investigational significant risk device in humans. For more information, please watch Device Overview and IDE Preparation that was presented at Research Matters last August. And this is the IDE life cycle, similar to IND. Once again, we will just focus on step 1 and portion of step 2 for this talk. So similar to what I mentioned earlier, step 1 is visit our website and book a free consultation. Here again is the link. During the consultation meetings, we will help determine the appropriate regulatory pathway and assess if IDE is needed. In relation to IDE requirements, we can classify devices into these 3 types as seen here. Full IDE submission to FDA is required when conducting clinical evaluation of significant risk device. To learn more about each of the regulatory requirements, you can take a look at the Code of Federal Regulations listed here, and also the significant risk device guidance as shown here. And during our consultation, you can ask any questions related to the device. These are some of the frequently asked questions, and we can help you answer them. Next step is similar to IND. We will do a needs assessment for what's called Q-Sub, which is a meeting with the FDA. And in this table, I have summarized the types of Q-Subs. I would also like to mention an example that there may be a situation where the manufacturer of the device initially claims it to be a non-significant risk device, but the IRB disagrees and indicates it as a significant risk device. Then we may suggest the investigator reach out to the FDA for a study risk determination Q-Sub meeting because FDA has the final say. To learn more about Q-Sub, please refer to the FDA guidance on Q-Sub as seen on the left-hand side portion of the screen here. Then once we know that the IDE needs to be submitted, we will review the IDE contents and format with the study team. Now I'm going to pass over again to Raj to talk about the IDE contents in detail and IDE package preparation best practices. Take it away,
Thank you,
Raj.
Rasija.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rasija. I'm back once more, this time to go over the IDE preparation. Investigational device exemption process, like the INDs for drugs, facilitates device investigations in humans, particularly in a formal clinical setting. An IDE is needed when testing a brand new medical device for using in humans, or when an FDA approved medical device is being applied in a clinical situation, such as for a new disease, a diagnosis, or treatment. RSO can assist the investigator team in the process. IDE application. Preparing an IDE starts with a specific FDA form 3514. It represents the opening cover sheet for the application. In addition, there is a cover letter. Form 3514 is downloadable from online, where you fill in the information such as the nature of the submission, who is responsible for the IDE, along with several specific study details discussing the device and the manufacturer. The IDE cover letter is custom prepared in the same way as the IND cover letter. RSO website has a template with a checklist for preparing the initial IDE application. We encourage the investigator team to follow the guidance and instructions therein to complete each item for the checklist. Chances are some information may not apply to your device situation, so you can skip those areas. Sponsor information should be relatively simple. Most of it can be a repetition of the information included in the cover sheet and cover letter. Prior investigations are important. It's actually literature search that facilitates this, and it's an important step in preparing the IDE application because it enables getting some previous work on the device, on the actual device to be used for providing the background and perspective for investigations. Such information can be your own preliminary work. For example, animal studies yielding a proof of concept for a human trial. Regardless, the recommended scenario would be to bring together some truly illustrative instances of the device, its use and application that compare to your area of investigation to make the study understandable. Essentially, the FDA is looking to have some basis for determining or reconfirming the safety and risk level of your device and its effectiveness when used in human subjects. And the good news is there's a lot of flexibility for presenting the details for the IDE. For example, you can present it in a comparison table or in a synoptical summary from based on the key references. Investigational plan brings out the critical details on how the investigations are going to be undertaken using the device. The study protocol provides the critical information needed here as in INDs. The format will be in an expanded protocol summary, since a full protocol will be accompanying the application. The investigational plan may also need a detailed statement on any anticipated safety concerns associated with the device use. And if such concerns are serious enough, the agency seeks appropriate information explaining the measures to be put in place to address those concerns. Like in INDs, IDEs may have a commercial intent in the long term or short term. Given that possibility, it's not uncommon to note that some IDEs are submitted when the device is in the middle of a pre-marketing application process. Manufacturing information. FDA may need the device's manufacturing information in the IDE for developing a better understanding of the risk level in the context of the proposed use. For off-label and or modified use of an approved device, the reference can be made to the manufacturing details obtained from the approved product label, plus any additional information made to the label due to subsequent changes. When using an unapproved device, manufacturing details need to be in the application, which could come from the manufacturer or reference obtained through the letter of agreement. Investigator agreement. The details of this are comparable to those what you may have filled in the FDA Form 1572. They both emphasize on the investigator's commitment to the critical study responsibilities. If there are multiple investigators and multiple sites under one PI or SI, then each investigator executes one agreement. Investigator certification. The purpose of this is to verify that the sponsor or the sponsor investigator is responsible for all the investigators or sub-investigators who signed the agreement. This item may not apply to a single investigator with no single sponsor investigator with no investigators, and you may mark it as not applicable. The next one is about the IRB. Unlike drugs, which are extremely well regulated, devices are far too many with highly variable product risk levels, which are determined based on every use and application. Given that, the interpretations on risk determinations may vary, or sometimes even the regulations may not be so obvious and clear-cut. This would also mean that on occasions, the FDA may rely on the IRB for a regulatory insight, or the agency may even designate the IRB as a surrogate regulatory body for a joint oversight. For all these reasons, the FDA needs to have full IRB information on file, including the contact details. Multiple sites. If multiple sites are involved in the IDE clinical studies, then the details of each site need to be provided for the FDA review. Financial claims are actually a description of the sales plan. When some commercial intent is in place. So when the sales idea is there, the FDA sees it as a commercialization effort and would need to know the amount the device is sold for. The sponsor or sponsor investigator must indicate if that is not happening. Environment-related information is provided if there is any environment-related scenarios, such as emission. This is to alert the device users and the human subjects. Labeling. This is actually something comparable to the package insert for drugs. The template has guidance on how to present labeling information for the approved and unapproved or investigational devices. Informed consent is very similar to the IND situation. Additional information may not be needed all the time. It may be left blank, or it can also be, the space can be used for literature references cited in the application. that marks the end of the initial IDE preparation process. And with that, we wrap up the part one of the mini-series focused on the types of IND and IDE and IND and IDE application preparation. For part two of the mini-series, the IND and IDE submissions will be the topic. We sincerely hope that the information presented today is useful and relevant for your work. Please do join us for the other important topics to follow on IND and IDE in this mini-series during the succeeding months. In the meantime, please do contact the Regulatory Support Office for assistance in case of any FDA regulatory needs. If there are any questions concerning today's discussion, please do send them to us via chat or email. We wish to thank you all very much for attending, and now I will turn over to the next speaker, Tara. Hi, Tara.
Thank you, Raj. Welcome, everyone. To progress further into our discussion, I'd like to talk about electronic consent and record keeping. Throughout the presentation, we will cover the federal regulations concerning informed consent and its documentation, while providing some definitions related to these requirements, and we will go over IRB considerations for e-consent and documentation, as well as examine methods of obtaining e-consent and provide useful information on storing your records properly. As a previous research coordinator, one of the most important processes I learned when working with my research team and obtaining consent from participants is to allow participants to ask questions, as many questions as they have, provide answers to those questions, and give them enough time to make an informed decision on whether or not they want to take part in the study. Here are the key components of the federal regulations that govern human subjects, with the requirements needed to obtain informed consent and document informed consent. These are important to review, and please note that I will provide a copy of this presentation so you can all have quick reference to any regulations or websites I shared during this presentation. E-consent. While obtaining consent in person is ideal, electronic consent is also a great way, or e-consent, to obtain consent and is becoming more and more feasible as time and technology have advanced. So what exactly is electronic or e-consent? Well, it's a process of obtaining consent through electronic means like email, online forms, digital signatures, and this can be done either remotely or in person. I've included some familiar examples here, such as DocuSign, Zoom, and REDCap. These are just a few. There are 6 requirements that need to be met for e-consent to be valid. First, I'm thinking of 2 words, layman's terms. It can be easy sometimes to miss or leave in scientific terms or jargon throughout the consent. It's important to check the consent carefully and define terms you may think are hard or may be hard for another person to understand. Clearly state the purpose of the study, any risk associated with the study, benefits, if any, and participants' rights. Ultimately, it is up to the participants to decide whether or not they want to take part in the study. Maintaining confidentiality of participants' PHI and PII is always a priority, and consent should be documented according to institutional and federal regulations. The identity of the participant needs to be verified to make sure they are who they say they are. And finally, the PI and study team need to maintain records appropriately. This includes the research note that is created in EPIC and any other communication that is made between the researcher and the participant. Please note, the rights and welfare of human subjects is always a first priority, so it's very important to follow all ethical and legal requirements when using e-consent for human research. E-consent is part of the consent process or plan that is captured either in the protocol, Form A, and or the population form, Form C. This consenting plan needs to be reviewed and approved by the IRB before consent is obtained from any participants for human research studies. The consent plan should match exactly how you plan to consent participants. Defining documentation of consent. This is the federal requirement to use a written consent from that form that has been approved by the IRB that is signed and dated by the participant or the participant's legally authorized representative at the time of consent, including the person obtaining consent, which can be the PI or someone in the research team, someone of the research team with permissions to do so. Here you will see 6 considerations the IRB makes regarding the use of e-documentation of consent, or electronic documentation, I should say, that I will explain further one by one. The IRB must consider whether there are adequate provisions to protect the privacy of each subject and to maintain the confidentiality of the identifiable data at each segment of the research, from recruitment to the maintenance of the data. While considering documentation of electronic consent, the IRB must ensure that the system that is used is secure with restricted access and should include methods to ensure confidentiality regarding the subject's identity, study participation, and personal information after informed consent has been obtained. DocuSign is the only software currently that can be used to obtain e-signatures for FDA-regulated studies because it does meet Part 11 compliance. REDCap and other UT Southwestern approved software can be used to obtain e-signatures for all other studies that are not FDA regulated at this time. So what is Part 11 compliance? Well, it applies to FDA regulated research. CFR stands for Code of Federal Regulation, but to simply state, 21 CFR Part 11 in particular details the criteria under which electronic records and signatures are considered to be trustworthy and equivalent to paper records. Well, while also giving companies the opportunity to market their products and, reap benefits of paperless record-keeping systems. DocuSign is a way to obtain e-signatures on consent forms. It is 21 CFR Part 11 compliant. To use DocuSign, you must obtain a license. UT Southwestern has licenses available for sender accounts. To obtain a DocuSign sender account, the requester will need to email the service desk, including the following information when requesting: your full name, department, your UT Southwestern username and official job title, and the intended business purpose for DocuSign use. If employed with Southwestern Health Resources, include that detail in the request. I have included a website you can click on for more information when you receive the slides. If the study is FDA regulated and or COVID related, please contact HRPP at hrpp@utsouthwestern.edu to see if a DocuSign Part 11 account is actually necessary to set up. Keep in mind there is a $6 fee charged each time a consent is emailed. REDCap is HIPAA compliant and can be used as a means of documenting informed consent, minus FDA regulated studies at this time. REDCap users must have access to an internet-enabled device so they can view and sign the consent form. Our HRPP office is working on a conformance package as we speak, so in the near future, we can officially call REDCap Part 11 compliant. This should happen within the next couple of months. So this is good news. Continuing on to further considerations regarding e-documentation of informed consent, you should be able to display or use the most current version of the IRB approved consent document. In eIRB, under the Documents tab from the Parent Smart Form, you will find the most currently approved ICF available there. You must also have the ability to reconsent participants who are already enrolled. This can be done, well, if applicable, but this can be done the same way you obtain initial e-consent while ensuring that the participants can see and understand the info that was given to them, as well as the ability for them to ask questions, and then also for you to provide answers. There must be a way for participants or their LAR, legally authorized representative, to document their willingness to participate in the research study, unless waived. These methods actually can include a checkbox or a signature by mouse or finger pad. Participants or their legally authorized representative must be able to print or download or save a copy of the consent form for their own personal records. You can also mail or email securely the signed consent form. Remember, for email, you must type secure mail in the subject line of the email before sending. This encrypts the email, thus making it secure to send. Lastly, the details of this must be included in Form C and or Form A of the protocol. I know this slide is a bit busy, but here are some special considerations when referring to minors and persons with diminished capacity to consent. Please note that e-consent can be used to obtain assent from these populations. For minors, parent permission is required. For persons with diminished capacity, include their LAR, legally authorized representative. And note that nothing should stop a person's capability to assent, and language must be understandable. For example, antibiotics can be explained as medicines that attack the germs that are making you sick. Assent process should be captured in your consent plan, Form C and or Form A. For minors, depending on the type of study, it may be appropriate for the parent to initially document the child's assent, which can be verified when the PI first sees the child. For persons with diminished capacity to consent, confirming with the LAR is appropriate. So let's go over remote consent, which integrates e-consent and e-documentation in the process. Remote consent is obtaining informed consent when the participant and the person obtaining consent are not meeting in person or face-to-face. It's actually a process of 4 steps, and I'll go through the 4 steps. Step 1, provide the informed consent document prior to the consent discussion to the prospective participant or LAR. And this can be done by means of postal or snail mail, encrypted email, fax, or a hyperlink to an online or virtual consent document. Step 2, all required elements of consent must be provided to prospective participants or their LARs and can be conducted either by telephone calls. If you do a telephone call, please provide a telephone script. We have a template available on UT Southwestern HRPP website under quick links, and then you can click on forms. This can also be done by video call to provide a virtual consent discussion, and online, including the use of videos, hyperlinks for more information, etc. Please note that you must include contact information when this option is used, so the study team can answer questions prior to providing informed consent. Step 3, the most common options for documenting informed consent are included under this step, and they include DocuSign, which is the only option for FDA regulated studies at this time. REDCap, which is HIPAA compliant. Photograph of a signature on paper consent. This can be mailed or emailed or otherwise sent or saved electronically. Postal mail, consent may be signed by the participants and then mailed back to the study team for signature. But please note that a consent note should be drafted to explain the difference in signature dates between the research participant and the study team. Also, you can use email. Signed consents may be photographed or scanned and emailed back to the study team for signature. Again, consent note should be drafted to explain the difference in signature dates between the research participant and the study team. So we go on to this last step, step 4. You want to provide a copy of the consent to the participant or LAR by either postal or snail mail, was what they call it. These are going to be the fully executed documents, meaning that they're signed by both parties and they may be mailed to the participants. And encrypted email, fully executed consents may be emailed to participants or their LARs using encryption, just like I explained earlier. Now let's talk about iMed consent, which is coming soon to an HRPP near you. iMed consent is a software application designed to help healthcare providers obtain informed consent from their patients before medical procedures or treatments. The IRB approved consent form is directly loaded into Epic by the IRB staff. The researcher may access the consent form during a research clinic encounter and have the participant electronically sign the consent form. iMed consent is great because it can help researchers improve their informed consent process by ensuring that participants receive accurate info about their research procedures and that their consent is documented appropriately. And it also reduces the risk of noncompliance. iMed consent is signed through Epic and is also 21 CFR Part 11 compliant. This will be done through the already established electronic signature capture system that is used in standard medical practice. Our office is actually currently working to finalize the SOPs and have identified a study to test the procedures out with. But once this has been finalized, we will inform the research community once it's ready to be used and provide education on how to request IMED consenting capability and provide instructions for use. So this is pretty cool, and it's up and coming. And last but not least, we end at record keeping. All signed copies of the consent forms need to be uploaded into EPIC, according to UT Southwestern and policies at affiliated institutions. A consent note should also be added into EPIC if required, as well as the research record. Save signed consents in the regulatory files for future audits and monitoring visits. Please know that consents can be saved electronically, or if you're old school like myself, you may store them in a 3-ring binder. And finally, keep all signed consents and all applicable documentation for the longest time required. For example, if a sponsor says that they want you to keep the records for 15 years, well, then you should keep those records for 15 years. And here are my references, and thank you for listening today.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Tara. So with that, this does conclude the presentations for today's session. And I'm actually going to take a pause for a few seconds to allow you some time to type up any questions. So. Okay, so we do have a question, and I'm going to ask it. So Tara or anyone else on the panel, do video calls need to have a script or only telephone calls?
Erica, is
Tara?
it okay if I was going to say, is it okay if I verbally answer that question?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Yeah. So the IRB really wants to understand what information is being provided to the participant. So if you're doing any type of communication, either on the phone or like through any remote video, we just want to know again all the information. So we do want to see a script, so that way again we can confirm the details that you're discussing with the participant.
Okay, thank you. And we have time for another question that we got. It is, when using snail mail to send the paper consent to a participant to be returned also by mail, what date and time do you annotate in the paper form?
I'm sorry, I'm having troubles with my sound. Apologies. So the date and time that you receive the consent is when the date and time that you want to sign it, and just make sure that you have the research record captures the date and time when the participant signed versus when you sign.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so while we wait for any other questions to get typed up, I just want to remind you of the survey. So if you can just spend a few minutes to complete the questions, we will use the information to approve the content of these sessions and how we present them. So we will also be able to see what areas we need to work on in the office and what areas we are excelling in. I do see one other question that I would like to ask since we have just another minute left, and it is, when is an information sheet appropriate versus consent?
I'll tackle that one also, Erica.
Okay.
So what you have to consider with an information sheet or informed consent in general, when informed consent is applicable to a research study, like for example, expedited review onward, when it's determined that informed consent is required, an information sheet can be used to obtain informed consent when there's a waiver of documentation of informed consent. We also, just kind of for the sake of making sure that we apply normal ethics for exempt studies that employ surveys, we want to see an information sheet there. So So the difference between the two obviously is that an information sheet for an expedited study onward, that's actually the informed consent process. Whereas an exempt study, it's information that's being provided to the participant. So that's the difference between the two information sheet.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so we are at time. I just want to thank our presenters. Oh, okay, actually, I do see another question that should be asked. So, okay. It is if a video call, it's a follow-up. So if a video call, how is that different than a face-to-face meeting with regards to what information is shared? A script is not required for in-person consent conferences. So Maya, Tara?
So my apologies, I didn't hear the first part of the original question. So, and that's why I commented that a script would be needed. So if you have a session and it's like through Zoom, it's a video conference, you don't normally have some type of script that we approve or require when you're doing the informed consent process when you're in person. So we wouldn't require it on any type of video process.
Okay. All right, so we are at time. So we are going to conclude. I thank you all for being here today. I want to thank our presenters, Raj, Rastija, Erico from the RSO, and Tara, and thank you all for attending today's session. The next Research Matters session is scheduled for April 18th, so have a great rest of your week. See you next time.